Today, I'm going to answer one of the most asked questions in the entire XRP community. How much XRP is actually enough? How many coins do you really need to change your life? How many coins do you need to become wealthy? How many coins do you need to retire early, buy a nice home, take care of your family, and never worry about money again? I have seen this question asked thousands of times in comment sections, in Discord servers, in Reddit threads, and in private messages. And most of the answers people give are either way too vague or way too optimistic without any real math behind them. People throw out numbers like 10,000 XRP or 100,000 XRP without explaining where those numbers come from or what they are actually based on. So today I'm going to do something different. I'm going to answer this question using real data, real statistics from the XRP network itself, real math based on what XRP is actually trying to accomplish in the global financial system, and real comparisons to other major currencies and financial systems so you can understand just how big this opportunity actually is. By the end of this video, you're going to have a clear picture of exactly how much XRP puts you in the top 10% of all holders, the top 5%, the top 1%, and beyond. You are going to understand what those amounts could potentially be worth if XRP achieves even a fraction of what it is being built to do. And you are going to have a personal target that makes sense for your own situation and your own financial goals. Before we can talk about how much XRP is enough, we need to understand the landscape. We need to know what most XRP holders actually have right now. Because your wealth in any system is not just about how much you own in absolute terms. It is about how much you own relative to everyone else. Think about it this way. If you have $100,000 in a country where the average person earns $500 a year, you are extremely wealthy. But if you have $100,000 in a country where the average person is a millionaire, you are actually behind. Context matters. Relative position matters. So let us look at where most XRP holders actually stand right now. When you pull up the actual network data for XRP wallet balances, the picture is very clear. There are approximately 3.6 million XRP wallets that hold between 0 and 20 XRP. These are the smallest holders, people who maybe bought a tiny amount to try it out, or who received a small amount from a friend, or who just never added more after their first purchase. 20 XRP at today's prices is worth less than $50. These are not serious investment positions. These are starter positions or forgotten wallets. Then there are approximately 2.5 million XRP wallets that hold between 20 and 500 XRP. This is the next tier up. Still not a huge position, but more meaningful than the first group. 500 XRP at today's prices is worth roughly $1,100. Better, but still a relatively small investment in the grand scheme of things. When you add those two groups together, you have over 6 million wallets holding less than 500 XRP. That is the majority of XRP wallets on the entire network. Most people who own XRP own less than 500 coins. Most people who own XRP have less than $1,100 worth at current prices. Now let us look higher up the distribution. There are a solid number of wallets holding between 1,000 and 5,000 XRP, but even that group is much smaller than the crowd below 500. And as you go higher to 10,000 coins, 50,000 coins, 100,000 coins, the numbers get smaller and smaller very quickly. What this data tells us is something incredibly important. The XRP holder base is heavily skewed toward small holders. The vast majority of people in this space have very little, and the people with meaningful positions, the ones holding thousands or tens of thousands of coins, are a small minority. This is your opportunity. Because if XRP grows and reaches the price targets that its technology and adoption suggest are possible, the people with meaningful positions are going to see life-changing wealth. And right now, meaningful positions are still attainable for regular people. That window is not going to stay open forever. To be in the top 10% of all XRP wallet holders in the entire world right now, you only need to hold 2,381 XRP. That is it, 2,301 coins. At current prices of around $2.20 per coin, that is roughly $5,000 worth of XRP. $5,000 puts you in the top 10% of all XRP holders on Earth. Let that sink in for a moment. The entire XRP ecosystem has millions of wallets. People from every country in the world hold XRP. And to be in the top 10% of all of them, you only need about $5,000 worth at current prices. For many people watching this, that is an achievable goal. Not easy necessarily, but achievable with discipline and consistent saving over time. Now let us go higher. To be in the top 5% of all XRP holders, you need approximately 8,000 XRP. At current prices, that is roughly $17,600. Still a meaningful amount of money, but not out of reach for someone who saves and buys consistently over a period of time. To be in the top 4%, you need about 10,000 XRP, roughly $22,000 at current prices. That is a used car. That is a down payment in some housing markets. That is a number that serious long-term investors can realistically work toward. To be in the top 1% of all XRP holders in the world, you need approximately 48,000 XRP. At current prices, that is around $105,000. That is a more serious commitment. That requires real dedication and real capital. But for people who understand what XRP is building and who take a multi-year view, that number is not as impossible as it might sound at first. And then there is the top 0.5%, the top 0.2%, the top 0.1%. These are the holders with hundreds of thousands of coins. The people who got in early bought consistently through every dip and every crash and never gave up on their conviction. These people are positioned to see truly extraordinary wealth if XRP achieves its potential. Now here is the key comparison that puts all of this into perspective. In the United States, being in the top 10% of the population by net worth means you are a millionaire. You have over $1 million in total assets. That is the standard definition of being in the American top 10% financially. But to be in the top 10% of XRP holders, you only need 2,301 coins. So the question becomes, what price does XRP need to reach for those 2,301 coins to be worth $1 million? The answer is approximately $434 per XRP. Does that sound crazy? We are going to walk through the math that shows exactly why it might not be as crazy as it sounds. Part 3. The US dollar comparison and what it means for price. One of the most useful ways to think about what XRP could be worth is to compare it to existing currencies and financial systems. Not because XRP is going to become the next US dollar exactly, but because these comparisons give us a framework for understanding scale and potential. Let us start with the US dollar money supply. The US M2 money supply, which is basically the total amount of dollars circulating in the economy, including bank deposits and easily accessible savings, is approximately $22.4 trillion using December 2025 figures. The total supply of XRP is 100 billion coins. The circulating supply right now is approximately 60.85 billion XRP. These are the coins that are actually out there in the market, in wallets, available to be bought and sold. So here is the big hypothetical question. What if XRP achieved a similar scale and usage to the US dollar? What if XRP became as widely used and as widely held as the US dollar currently is? What would each coin be worth? The math is straightforward. If XRP needed to match the US dollar M2 money supply of $22.4 trillion, and there are approximately 60.85 billion XRP in circulation, then each coin would need to be worth approximately $368. That is the price per XRP if it matched the US dollar's total circulating value. Using the fully diluted supply of 100 billion coins, the price would be approximately $224 per XRP. Now what does that mean for your holdings? At $368 per coin, you would need approximately 2,717 XRP to have $1 million in net worth, less than 3,000 coins for $1 million. At current prices, those 2,717 coins cost you roughly $6,000. $6,000 invested today could potentially be worth $1 million if XRP matches the scale of the US dollar. I want to be very clear, this is a speculative scenario. Nobody knows if XRP will reach this scale. Nobody can guarantee any price target. But the math is real, and the comparison is valid as a way of thinking about potential. And here is something important that a lot of people bring up when this comparison is made. Some people argue that XRP does not actually need to match the US dollar M2 supply to achieve these prices. The reason is something called velocity. Velocity in economics means how quickly money moves through the system. A dollar that gets used 50 times per year in transactions creates 50 times more economic activity than a dollar that sits in a savings account all year without moving. XRP is designed for extremely high velocity. It is meant to be used constantly, moving value back and forth across borders at lightning speed, being the bridge currency for thousands of transactions every single day. If XRP has very high velocity, meaning the same coins are used over and over again in rapid succession, then the price could actually be much lower than the M2 comparison suggests, while still handling a massive volume of global transactions. Or conversely, if velocity is high and adoption is high, the price could be much higher because the demand to hold XRP at any given moment would be intense, even with coins turning over quickly. This is why some of the more aggressive price predictions for XRP are not as disconnected from reality as they might seem. The combination of high utility, high velocity, growing institutional adoption, and fixed supply creates conditions where the price has significant upward pressure from multiple directions at once. Let us look at another way of thinking about XRP's potential price: the SWIFT scenario. SWIFT stands for the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It is the messaging network that banks use to communicate with each other when sending money internationally. When your bank sends money to a bank in another country, that instruction travels through SWIFT. When a company in America pays a supplier in Japan, that payment instruction travels through SWIFT. SWIFT handles an absolutely enormous volume of transactions every single year. We are talking about trillions and trillions of dollars of international transfers flowing through this system annually. It is the backbone of global international banking. But SWIFT has a massive problem. It is old, slow, and expensive. A SWIFT transfer can take anywhere from 1 to 5 business days to complete. It passes through multiple correspondent banks along the way, each one taking a small fee. By the time money arrives at its destination, the fees have added up, and the recipient has been waiting for days. Ripple built its on-demand liquidity product, which uses XRP, specifically to replace SWIFT. The idea is simple. Instead of waiting days and paying multiple fees as your money passes through a chain of correspondent banks, you use XRP as the bridge. Your currency gets converted to XRP, the XRP flies across the world in 3 to 5 seconds, and then gets converted to the destination currency on the other side. The whole process costs a fraction of a penny and takes about the same amount of time as sending a text message. The question for XRP's price is how much of SWIFT's volume it captures, and what that means for the value needed to be held in XRP to facilitate all those transactions. At 20% capture of global SWIFT flows, the math suggests XRP prices well above $100 per coin. At 50% capture, prices above $250 become mathematically plausible. At full replacement, meaning XRP completely takes over what SWIFT currently does, prices above $500 per coin start appearing in serious financial models. And here's the thing: these price estimates are conservative in some ways because they only account for SWIFT replacement. XRP is also being used for retail payments, for central bank digital currencies, for tokenization of real-world assets, for micropayments, and for dozens of other use cases that SWIFT does not even touch. If you stack all those use cases together, the total demand for XRP could be far higher than just replacing SWIFT would create. So when people talk about XRP reaching $200, $300, or $500, they are not pulling those numbers out of thin air. Those numbers have real mathematical foundations based on the actual size of the markets XRP is targeting. One of the biggest and most exciting opportunities for XRP that most people are not talking about enough is real-world asset tokenization. This is going to be one of the defining financial trends of the next decade, and XRP is positioned right at the center of it. So what does tokenization actually mean? Let me explain it simply. Right now, if you own a house, that house is a physical object. To sell it, you need lawyers, real estate agents, title companies, banks, and a process that takes weeks or months and costs thousands of dollars in fees. The house is what economists call an illiquid asset. It takes a lot of time and money to convert it into cash. Tokenization means taking the ownership rights to that house and representing them as digital tokens on a blockchain. Once your house is tokenized, you can sell 10% of it to someone in Japan, 5% to someone in Germany, and 15% to someone in Brazil, all in a matter of minutes, all for almost no cost. You can do this at any time of day or night. No lawyers needed for the transaction, no title companies, no banks in the middle taking fees, just a smart contract that automatically transfers ownership when the transaction is completed. Now imagine this applied not just to houses, but to everything that has value: commercial real estate, private company shares, government bonds, corporate bonds, fine art, gold, oil, intellectual property, sports contracts. Any asset in the world that has value can potentially be tokenized and put on a blockchain. The total value of all assets that could potentially be tokenized is measured in the hundreds of trillions of dollars. Some estimates put the addressable market for tokenization at over $500 trillion when you include all real estate, all bonds, all stocks, all commodities, and all other assets globally. Now let us think about what happens when even a small fraction of that value moves onto the XRP ledger. Every tokenized asset transaction requires XRP for the gas fee. Gas fees are the tiny amounts of XRP that get burned, permanently destroyed with every transaction on the ledger. The more transactions happen, the more XRP gets burned. The more XRP gets burned, the smaller the total supply becomes. The smaller the supply becomes, the more valuable each remaining coin is. If even 1% of global assets get tokenized on the XRP ledger over the next decade, the volume of transactions would be astronomical. The amount of XRP burned would be significant, and the price would reflect that reduced supply against growing demand. This is why people who understand the tokenization opportunity are not worried about XRP sitting at $2. They see $2 as the price before most of the world has woken up to what is being built. There is another piece of the puzzle that connects directly to XRP's price potential, and that is RLUSD. Ripple has created its own stablecoin called RLUSD. A stablecoin is a digital currency that is always worth exactly $1. It does not go up and down like regular crypto. It stays stable at $1 per coin. Why does a company that has XRP also need a stablecoin? Because there are situations where people and institutions need to move dollar value amounts without any price volatility. If a bank needs to send $10 million to another bank, they might not want to use XRP because the price of XRP could move during the transaction. They want to send exactly $10 million and have exactly $10 million arrive. RLUSD solves that problem, but here's the crucial connection to XRP's price. Every single transaction on the XRP ledger, including RLUSD transactions, requires XRP to pay the network fee. This fee is tiny, just a fraction of a cent, but it is real and it permanently removes that XRP from the total supply by burning it. So every time a bank sends RLUSD on the XRP ledger, a tiny amount of XRP is destroyed forever. Every time a real-world asset is tokenized and transferred on the XRP ledger, a tiny amount of XRP is destroyed forever. Every time any transaction of any kind happens on the XRP ledger, XRP is destroyed forever. Now think about the scale. Ripple is targeting the global banking system. They are talking to central banks in over 30 countries. They are providing infrastructure for international payments that currently handle trillions of dollars per year. If even a meaningful fraction of that activity moves onto the XRP ledger, the daily burn rate of XRP becomes significant. Millions of transactions per day, each one removing a tiny bit of XRP from existence forever. Over months and years, that adds up to a massive reduction in the total supply. This creates what is called a structural supply shock. The supply keeps shrinking while the demand from growing institutional usage keeps increasing. In any market, shrinking supply plus growing demand equals higher prices. It is not complicated. It is just math. One thing that separates XRP from almost every other cryptocurrency right now is regulatory clarity. After years of legal battles with the SEC, XRP has emerged with something that is genuinely rare in the crypto world: clear legal status in the United States. Why does this matter so much for price? Because institutional money, the really big money, the trillions of dollars managed by pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, major banks, and large investment firms, cannot legally invest in assets that are in regulatory limbo. These institutions have compliance departments, legal teams, and regulatory obligations that prevent them from putting money into anything that might later be classified as an illegal security. For years, XRP was in exactly that uncertain position. The SEC was suing Ripple and claiming XRP was an unregistered security. During that time, many institutional investors stayed completely away from XRP. They might have wanted to invest. They might have seen the technology and understood the opportunity, but they could not take the legal risk. Now that clarity has been achieved, those doors are opening. Institutional investors who were watching from the sidelines now have a legally safe path to invest in XRP. And institutional money moves in very large amounts. We are not talking about individual investors buying a few $100s worth. We are talking about funds making purchases worth millions or hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. The exchange reserves data tells this story very clearly. Exchange reserves of XRP are currently at an 8-year low. That means the amount of XRP sitting on exchanges available for regular buyers is the lowest it has been in almost a decade. At the same time, large wallet holders have been increasing their accumulation significantly. Coins are leaving exchanges and moving into long-term cold storage. The available supply is shrinking while institutional interest is growing. This is a classic setup for a supply squeeze. When the demand from institutions wanting to buy XRP finally exceeds the amount available on exchanges, the price does not move gradually. It moves fast, and it moves big. Sellers can name their price when buyers have no other choice. Now let us talk about something that happened very recently that most people have not fully processed yet. The SEC just approved Nasdaq's plan to bring blockchain technology into U.S. equity markets through a tokenized security framework. Nasdaq is the second largest stock exchange in the world. When Nasdaq decides to do something, it matters. It sets a precedent. It signals to every other exchange and every other financial institution that this is the direction things are heading. What Nasdaq is doing is essentially preparing to put stocks on a blockchain. Instead of the current system where buying a stock takes 2 business days to fully settle and can only be done during market hours, blockchain-based trading would allow instant settlement at any time of day or night. Think about what that means for the size of the opportunity. The U.S. equity market alone is worth approximately $126 trillion, $126 trillion of stocks that could potentially be traded 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on blockchain rails. The transaction volume that would generate is enormous, and if any meaningful portion of that activity flows through the XRP ledger, the demand for XRP as the settlement layer and the gas fee currency grows enormously. The current SEC chair, Paul Atkins, has been very clear about where this is all heading. He spoke about how the previous regulatory environment was so complicated and so hostile to innovation that it pushed an entire generation of blockchain companies out of the United States. Companies built their products in Singapore, in Switzerland, in Dubai, in the Cayman Islands, anywhere but America, because America's regulatory environment made it too risky to operate there. Those days are ending. The SEC is now actively working to create clear, sensible rules that allow blockchain innovation to happen in the United States. And with that clarity comes the confidence for major institutions to fully commit to this technology. Paul Atkins also talked about how smart contracts can automate most of what regulatory compliance specialists currently do manually. Right now, companies pay enormous amounts of money to lawyers and compliance officers just to navigate the SEC's complex rules. Smart contracts can read those rules and enforce them automatically. That removes middlemen, reduces costs, and makes the whole system more efficient. This shift toward automation and blockchain-based compliance is not just good for crypto investors. It is good for the entire economy because it reduces friction, reduces costs, and allows capital to move more efficiently to where it can do the most good. Now let us bring all of this back to the personal level, because understanding the macro picture is important, but you also need a practical strategy for your own situation. The first thing you need to do is decide on your target tier. Based on the percentile data we looked at earlier, here are the main tiers to consider. The entry-level meaningful position is 2,301 XRP. This puts you in the top 10% of all XRP holders globally. At current prices, this costs roughly $5,000. If you can save and invest $200 per month, it takes about 2 years to reach this level. If you can save $500 per month, it takes under a year. This is the minimum target for someone who is serious about being meaningfully positioned in XRP. The next level is 8,000 XRP for the top 5%. This costs roughly $17,600 at current prices. A more serious commitment, but still achievable for many people over a multi-year time frame with consistent buying. The 10,000 XRP milestone at the top 4% costs about $22,000 at current prices. This is a significant investment, but one that starts to look very compelling when you run the price scenarios we talked about earlier. At $250 per coin, 10,000 XRP is worth $2.5 million. The 48,000 XRP level for the top 1% is a major financial commitment at current prices, around $105,000. But for people who have been in the workforce for a while, who have savings, or who are willing to make significant sacrifices for a period of time, this level is achievable, and the potential upside at the price targets we discussed is extraordinary. Beyond that, you have the top 0.5%, the top 0.2%, the top 0.1%. These are positions that most people will never reach simply because of the cost and the commitment required. But for those who do and who are right about where XRP is heading, the financial outcome could be generational. The strategy for reaching any of these targets is the same, regardless of which tier you are aiming for. You buy consistently. You do not try to time the market perfectly. You set up automatic purchases on a regular schedule, whether that is weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, and you stick to it no matter what the price is doing. When the price drops and everyone else is panicking, you keep buying. When the price is boring and going sideways and nothing seems to be happening, you keep buying. When your friends laugh at you for still being in XRP, you keep buying. The people who built the biggest XRP positions are not the ones who made one perfect trade. They are the ones who showed up consistently month after month, year after year, and never stopped accumulating. I want to be completely honest with you about the risks involved here because blind optimism is dangerous. Anyone who tells you XRP going to $500 is guaranteed is lying to you. Nobody knows the future. Every price target we have discussed is speculative. Every scenario we have modeled is a possibility, not a certainty. Here are the real risks you need to understand. The first risk is competition. XRP is not the only blockchain technology competing for the institutional payments market. There are other projects working on the same problems. There are central bank digital currencies being developed by governments themselves. There is no guarantee that XRP wins the race, even if it is currently well positioned. The second risk is regulation. Even though XRP has achieved significant regulatory clarity in the US, the regulatory environment globally is still evolving. New rules in major markets could affect how XRP can be used, who can hold it, and how it can be traded. Regulatory risk never completely goes away in the crypto space. The third risk is technology. The XRP ledger is proven technology, but the financial world moves fast. New innovations could emerge that offer significant advantages over what XRP currently provides. Staying ahead technologically requires constant development and adaptation. The fourth risk is adoption speed. All the price scenarios we discussed are based on XRP achieving significant adoption among banks, central banks, and other financial institutions. That adoption is happening, but it is happening gradually. If adoption moves slower than expected, price catalysts could take much longer to materialize than optimistic projections suggest. The fifth risk is simple market volatility. Even if everything goes right for XRP long term, the short-term price can be extremely volatile. Drops of 30, 40, or 50% can and do happen in the crypto market. If you are not mentally and financially prepared for that volatility, you could panic and sell at exactly the wrong time, locking in losses just before a recovery. Managing these risks requires having a clear strategy before you invest. Only invest money you can genuinely afford to lose completely. Do not invest rent money, emergency fund money, or money you need in the next 1 to 2 years. Crypto investments should be money you are comfortable not touching for a long time. Diversify your approach within your XRP strategy by buying at multiple price points over time rather than putting everything in at once. This reduces the risk of buying at a temporary peak. Have clear targets for when you would take profits and stick to them. Do not let greed keep you in past your own goals. And stay informed. Follow developments in the XRP ecosystem, in the broader regulatory environment, and in the institutional adoption space. Informed investors make better decisions than ones who are just hoping for the best. Conclusion: what is your number? So after all of this, what is the answer to the original question? How much XRP is actually enough? The honest answer is that it depends entirely on what you want your life to look like and how much risk you are willing to take to get there. If your goal is to have $1 million and you believe XRP will reach the kind of prices that its technology and adoption suggest are possible, then you need somewhere between 2,700 and 5,000 XRP depending on which price scenario plays out. That is an achievable target for a lot of people. If your goal is $5 million, you are looking at somewhere between 13,000 and 25,000 XRP depending on the scenario. If your goal is truly life-changing generational wealth, you want to be in the top 1% or beyond, which means working toward 48,000 coins or more over time. The most important thing is not to have the perfect number. The most important thing is to have a number at all, to set a target, to understand why you chose that target, and to work toward it with discipline and consistency. Because here is the truth about wealth creation in any form. It is not about making one great decision. It is about making consistently good decisions over a long period of time. The people who are going to look back in 10 years and be glad they were in XRP are not the people who timed the perfect entry. They are the people who started buying, kept buying through the uncertainty, and never let fear or boredom or impatience push them out of their position before the full story played out. The XRP holder distribution data shows that most people in this space have very little. Most people will be spectators to whatever happens next. But you are here, you are paying attention, you are doing the math, you are thinking about this seriously. That is already more than most people will ever do. So what is your number? Are you going for 2,301 coins and the top 10%? Are you going for 8,000 and the top 5? Are you going for 48,000 and the top 1%? Or are you shooting for something even bigger? Whatever your target is, write it down today, make it real. And then start working toward it one consistent purchase at a time. The opportunity is here right now. The supply is shrinking, the institutions are moving in, the regulatory clarity is in place, the technology is proven, the global financial system is ready for an upgrade. The only question left is how much of this you are going to own when it all comes together. And as always, please remember, none of this is financial advice. These are speculative scenarios based on real math and real adoption trends, but nobody can guarantee any outcome in the crypto market. Only invest what you can genuinely afford to lose. Do your own research. Talk to a qualified financial professional. Your money is your responsibility, and your decisions are your own. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Total approximate word count, 10,000 words.